Welcome to Startup Sessions by Common Wisdom. I'm your host Ozzy, and this is where we focus on building and scaling a business in London. So hello everyone, here we are again with Mo. This is our second recording. In the first one, we talked about the success story of Countech, and I just listened to our recording again, and I think we've touched on some important topics. But this time, in our second session, we are with Mo again, and this is going to be a more personal podcast.
Hi, Ozzy. How you doing?
Hi, I'm great, thank you. So how are things since we last spoke?
It's great. I'm looking forward to the Christmas break. Usually it gets quiet for us during this period, but I'm excited about 2019 and what the business can do. So just, winding down and starting to plan for the next year coming ahead now. So looking forward to that.
Do I have your permission to ask personal questions in this podcast?
Yeah, sure. Let's go for it. It's going to be an interesting conversation today, I think.
Okay, I'll try to keep it civilized still. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your story, Mo, because we've talked, of course, we've talked about your business side of things, but I think especially when an entrepreneur is building up a business is not business at all. It is very, very personal, right? It has to do with your passions, what you want to change in the world, and the most important thing, it is about your personal energy level. And if you have that passion, that drive, and if you can manage your psychology and keep yourself motivated throughout the hardships, so I think it is very personal if a business succeeds or not at the beginning. And thinking in that terms, I think it makes a lot of sense to talk about your personal background and how you came to this point to be the founder of Countech, a business that is in the fintech sector and growing successfully in London. So I'm all ears, looking forward to hearing your story.
Thank you, Ozzy. Right, I think I have to start from the very beginning of my early life. Actually, I grew up in Mombasa, Kenya, which is a small little island. And with Indian descent, my parents struggled, when I was a young child. However, things took an event when my father was killed when I was 2 years old. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yes, and I think that was a huge turning point in my life because he didn't leave my mom much. And growing up in a very rough neighborhood in Mombasa, Kenya, was a challenge, and we struggled. My mom remained a single mother to look after our kids, and when I was 14 years old, we moved to North London, and it was, I think, a huge culture shock for me to come to a new country as a young boy. Looking back, when I look back, growing up as an orphan is not an easy task, especially when you come to a new country. I had no brothers, I never met any of my grandparents, and no had any uncles or family in the UK either. So it was a huge challenge.
Sorry to interrupt. Going back to the age of 14, and so you have just been to a different country, different culture. Can you remember what was different, what you felt, and what was different about what do you think was different about the culture at that age?
Going to school in this country was very different. The whole country was a lot more, civilized, advanced. So learning the roads, learning to take the train, learning to take the bus. It was very difficult to be able to understand the environment that you're growing up with. But I think, from a very young age, I think I had to learn to look after myself. I mean, I never took any hand down from my mother or anything like that. So I remember having a paper round job as soon as I go into this country. I think at the age of 16, I was waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning, doing paper rounds and working every summer in either convenience store or Next, or I've done quite a few of these odd jobs trying to make a living for myself. And I guess, when it is quite tough when you're growing up, and my mom never took any support from the government either. So she is not that kind of person. A very strong woman, and bless her for trying to be. She didn't understand the kind of challenges I was going through, and it was tough. And I think today we hear a lot about mental health, and that's become a very topical subject. And for a kid at that time who's going through huge change, growing up in another country, there was a lot of things when I look back, that are how I kind of had to struggle through life. And I think this kind of made me resilient, and um, made me want to have the opportunity to do something for myself. So I guess that's where the entrepreneurship comes from. From a very young age, I was trying to make money to survive, but I also enjoyed, transacting, as you can call it, or hustling, in a certain way. And so that, yeah, I guess that was some of the takes I got from a very young age.
I
Um,
think that's a very important part of the story. Um, because I do share some similarities with the story that you've gone through. But maybe you'll do a podcast and host me, and I'll tell my story in the future.
sure,
Um,
it would be good to know, actually.
but the point is, so the author Nassim Taleb, he has quite a few books on this subject. The most notable of which are Anti-Fragile and Black Swan. He has also. I first came to know him in another podcast by Stephen Dobner from the Free Economics Radio, and where Nassim Taleb was a guest, and they were talking about the question of why Lebanese people are so successful in the world. So apparently, it is his point that Lebanese people are very successful, and I don't see any contrary evidence, so I think that's true. And the reason is that they have resilience because of the turmoil and the chaotic atmosphere in their own country and in their own geography. They either have to adapt to that quickly changing landscape of priorities, business. So be resilient in the core of their personality to survive, and that turns out to be a very important trait when you come to another place to try to be an entrepreneur, because you use a lot of very similar skills. And I always see that trend in to a certain degree in myself, but also to a great degree in other people. So it is not always a bad thing to be in the circumstances that demand for you to give 100%, which in turn makes you a stronger athlete, right? If you try to train for running 100 meters at a very ambitious target, even if you don't reach that target, at the end of the day, you become a better runner. But that's what I believe.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the key traits of being an entrepreneur is, you have to go through a very lonely journey. Even when you start building a team and have people, you are pretty much the boss. So being at the top, it is a very lonely place. And having had the experience of being on a journey all by myself, I mean, it kind of made me want to do something for myself. And I never settled, and I could never see myself, I think, just because of my individual growing up pretty much being alone in what I would call it, having no fatherly figure around, that I had to stand up and try to support my family, help my mother, and try to, step up and be a man. And that lonely journey, I think, is where entrepreneurs also kind of find similarity, because they have to stand up and they have to get things done. So uh, it is, I guess you're right. The resilience comes from that, being lonely and trying to be able to then do something. So I remember, right, I did try to get, work hard and end up going to university and getting an accountancy degree. And the reason why I actually even chose accountancy in the first place was because at the back of my mind was I want to go into business. And if I want to understand a business, I think I need to understand the numbers. So I actually
Makes
really
sense.
didn't.
That makes sense a lot.
Yeah, and I actually did not want to be an accountant full time. I wanted to be an entrepreneur and have my own business. And even quite quickly after finishing my degree, I went into quite a few jobs, and I realized I couldn't continue working for someone. I mean, I worked for 11, 12 years, so I did work for a long time, being corporate to SMEs. But the goal was always to have something of my own. And because of my difficulties and my background, it took me a very long time to get it right and find the right business for me to start off. But I've started this 2 years ago, and I'm really excited about what I'm doing. I'm passionate about how things are coming into shape now.
But you know, the statistics and a lot of the combined wisdom in the startup area points out that people who have at least 5 to 10 years of experience and then become entrepreneurs are more successful than who do that straight out of the college. What do you
Yeah.
think your work experience has contributed to your way of thinking and your way of doing business?
Um, Good question. I have worked, I think, in over 15 different companies after my time graduating from university. And even prior to university, I think I had around another 12 jobs when I worked in different retail stores. Um, Having that experience of how I engage with customers, how I interact with customers, how I see different companies have different systems in place. Um, when you are able to look at it from an outside perspective, you can start seeing how you can always make things better. And I always, went into my job thinking, how do I make things better for tomorrow? And that kind of also made me make myself redundant in some cases, because I did the job so well that they felt like it was time for me to move on.
Yeah.
But it gave me an understanding of how businesses work and how system they use systems, and that's where my passion came out from those work experiences where I saw the change in technology and how things were done in accountancy, and I thought there's a better way to do this, and put these two things together.
Mm.
But going for me, running a business was not it's not only about making money. I've been married now for 15 years. I got married quite young. I had two children, and an important part of that was a little boy I had. So for me,
Yeah.
having gone through the difficulties myself of life growing up, it was really important that I'm able to spend time with my son and give him all the things that I missed out growing up as a kid.
Oh, I
And
see. I see. That's a very important point. So it's not just about jumping to the next class in terms of financial assets, but reaching that quality of life in terms of time assets as well. So you can spend it with your children and yeah, I see your point, and that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it was important that if I wanted a business that I could work from anywhere in the world and be able to spend time with my children and growing up. And for me, that was a huge factor in setting up Countech and trying to establish a business where I felt technology allows me to work from anywhere in the world. Accountancy is where I'm passionate about, and have studied it and put together. So it was important for me to be able to spend time with my children, see he grow up. He's now 10 years old. And he is the world to me. So business is not only about making money, but it's also about making sure that you are passionate about what you want to do in life as well, and see the bigger picture as well. So, and that to me, creates a recipe of success, hopefully.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Another point I'd like to discuss with you, I think it fits very well with this story as well, is the B2C versus the B2B markets of being an entrepreneur. Many people who just so I think this is very important because it has to do with the life story of the individual as well. To be able to be a successful entrepreneur and build a successful startup, a lot of things there are proxies for a lot of things, and you can learn many of them on the way. But one thing that's just super critical is that you need to know your customer and you need to know their existing problems so that you can start to develop a solution and iterate on that. And for people, and I've observed this in myself and in other people as well, and especially I think it's true for your case, when you have worked with companies, small companies, large companies, and when you go out and try to build a solution, you think of the problems people and businesses around you have. And the good thing is, you know the problems of the businesses because you've worked in them. So this gives you the flexibility to pick what you are building to be either in B2B or B2C as an entrepreneur. Whereas, and I might be wrong in this, but I just like to hear your thoughts on this. Whereas when you just graduate from the college or from the university, the only market that you know very well is the B2C market because you yourself are the consumer and you don't know the business side of the things. So from the get-go, you are limited to 50% of your potential in terms of what you can build. So I think being in a business is very beneficial and opens up new places and shows you a different new world as well. What has your experience been with this one, both from your personal level and your colleagues or other entrepreneurs that you've observed?
I think most entrepreneurs seem to have a trend of being a problem solver. I think it's difficult to be an entrepreneur and not be a problem solver because you will not be able to move things forward in the businesses. And as entrepreneurs, we come through a lot of stumbling blocks and hurdles where we have to face challenges ourselves. And it's you have to have the grit and to say that I can solve this problem and move forward. And so, yeah, it is important. And I think academic education is great to a certain extent, but it is an inner instincts that comes from within. You will see many successful entrepreneurs haven't had an education yet gone on to become very successful as well. And I think it's that their ability to solve problems and thrive on it. And I think if you have that attribute within yourself, I think you can go a long way to become successful. Because I've seen people when I go to work sometimes, so they are problem makers actually rather than problem solvers. So you get two types of people in there. So yes, it's important as being an entrepreneur, you have to be a problem solver and solve problems and get things done. And the difficulty is because you're alone, you're the only one that can solve these problems and nobody else. So you can't rely on anybody else to help you out. So you got to dig deep.
I always say entrepreneurs might be the only people in the world who when they face a problem, are happy rather than sad. They say, a delicious problem that I can sink my teeth into and possibly build a business out of.
And currently, right now, in the UK, we're going to go through the most challenging times I think probably ever faced in this country's history. And to me, facing Brexit as an entrepreneur, I look at it as an opportunity, whereas some people look at it as a difficult time ahead. I personally voted to leave the EU, so I know what we were going into when I voted for this, and I knew the difficulties that was going to come through it. But I also believe that at this moment in time, being innovative, being creative, being entrepreneur is the right thing to do, right? Because it's when you have the most opportunity in such a time and an economy to be able to succeed and create something that could be lasting. So I think it's a very good opportunity right now in this country, no matter what we're going through. And I think entrepreneurship will be the saving grace for this country over the next few years. And hopefully, the community that you're building can help move this country forward through a different transition.
I agree with that, to be honest. When the rules of the game change very rapidly, it creates an advantage for the people who are more resilient and who can adapt at a quicker pace. But another aspect of that is the amount of fuel you have, right? Amount of energy you have, the drive, the passion. And it is not always at the same level. It varies from time to time, and because just we are human beings, and we experience emotions. We have our ups and downs. So my next question is somewhat in regards to that. How do you manage to keep your motivation high, and how do you manage your energy versus your time? Do you have any skills, any tactics, any programs that you use, and how do you approach this whole energy versus time thing?
Very good question, and it's actually a very challenging subject as well for myself, and something that I have had to question and dig deep as well through my own personal mental health challenges that I've had to face to growing up. Trying to accept the people that have killed my father and put me into this position, and growing
Yeah.
up with such difficulty that I've had to question myself so many times as to what is the purpose of life, what am I doing here, and I think it comes down to then what I call something very important, which is faith and the belief in God, and that there is a bigger picture, and I think that energy of belief and faith is something that you can hold on to, and look for guidance, because that gives you comfort. And I also try to appreciate that, be grateful, I think, is really an important aspect of life that you need to look into. For someone like me who's gone through such difficulties, I still have to find an opportunity to be grateful about what I have. So
Mm.
looking at today, that I have a family which I'm grateful for. I have my own properties. I have beautiful children. So I have to find place to be grateful for, and that family, what I'm grateful for, is my motivation to keep me going. Is also to understand that there is faith, that God is going to look after us, and you know help us in difficult situations. We are all going to get tested on this earth, and we have to understand that life is a test. So there, everyone goes through ups and downs, but we have to understand within our own selves how we can make a difference, and just making sure that you continue working hard and being positive and being grateful for what you have. It's easy, very easy for everyone to look at the negative parts, and I can give you a whole list of that, just like most people can, but
Yeah.
you got to switch it and be grateful and have faith.
um, I think I agree with the general theme of what you're saying. I think you gotta believe in something, and being appreciative of what you have. I think is one of the most important skills in life, because we always look to the future and try to build up a future, but it is very difficult, right, to balance out appreciating what you have at the moment versus being hungry for future growth. Always looking to the future, being hungry for better and future growth, it kind of can be an antithesis to being very content in the moment and being appreciative of what you have. But going to the route of religious satisfaction is not necessarily a must for me, the way I see it. It is possible to reach that secular appreciation and that feeling as well. So what I would add is I think it is possible to go to that from both different ways. So moving on from that, I think your input on business culture in London is very important, and Startup Sessions, the podcast series, is in some way centered around the topic of building a business, especially in London, in the UK, and especially in London. I have my observations here, but you have been here for a great deal of time, and you have the the vantage point of seeing a different culture as well. So the most I'm most curious about how decision makers, especially in B2B, make their decisions regarding partners. And if you have any insights on that, I'd love to hear them.
Yes, I think just generally, in London, growing up in North London, was a challenge, and I think it's a huge market, a huge environment, and you can get easily lost in where we are. However, I see this as an opportunity, and although it took me a long time to get my foot into it, what I like about London is there are all the more technology savvy companies. Most of the businesses happen here, I mean, compared to other parts of England. So it's a lot more thriving and multicultural. And that's the amazing thing about England, the London, is it is very multicultural. So you can fit in right in, and start creating a business. However, I've noticed in B2B, it is time. It takes time to convert a client, and so it
Mm.
is work in progress, and you have to keep following it up, and not get disappointed and disheartened. It take within. within my industry, as a looking for clients within the accountancy, it's even much more challenging because accountants need to build trust. People, business owners have to build trust with their accountants. So,
That's
or
true.
usually it's a very long-term relationship with your accountant. So, for me to penetrate that market is a challenge because I find it that I am here new as a new startup trying to show people a different way of doing accounting, a much more efficient way, and they're looking at me and saying, "Oh, I don't know about the cloud. I don't know about you understanding my accounts and my numbers," and so it's a conversation that has to keep, happening over many months. It's taken me 12 months to get one client as well. So it's the way it is. But you just have to be persistent. Use systems like CRM systems to continue building your pipeline, and keep just going at it and trying to see where you can get new business from. What I've realized as well is that within as an accountant, I can work in many industries actually as serving clients. However, even within that, I have had to now niche and branch out to three, four industries where I feel will be much more useful for me to spend my energy targeting those kind of clients. So you have to break it all down and then see, okay, this is what I want to do and how I would go forward in terms of doing the B2B market.
I think there are very, very valuable 2 points that can be taken away from what you just said. And just to wrap them up, the first is it might take 12 months to get your first client, but when you do, it is on its way to become a good business. So patience goes a long way there, I think. And the
Sure.
second is you understand the different niches, the different areas that have opened up for building alternative businesses, pivoting into more efficient areas only after you've started doing that business and started building that thing, right? It is sometimes impossible to see that from afar. You need to really approach the business. You need to start building. You need to be very in the trenches to understand the next possible needs, so you can pivot your business to fit that very lucrative niche.
Sure. It actually took me 3 months to get my first client. And I mean,
Oh,
starting a
sorry,
business with
I
zero
misheard you, I guess.
clients, it was a challenge. I mean, the first 3 months was a hardship. I mean, at one point, my wife was telling me go back to work and get a job again, and I'm like, no, I need to stick this out and see it through. And she is very conservative. She's very reserved. And for her to see me take a risk like this and put all my savings and you know put myself into debt into starting a business was a challenge. But I had a vision in terms of I needed to do something. Even though it took me 3 months to get my first client, I kept pursuing it and made sure I stuck it out. And I did not want to go back to work and work with somebody else. And it was that desire to make sure that I succeed that, from what I've gone through and I wanted to go through and what I wanted to do for myself and my children and my family. That was the desire that pushed me to make sure that it worked. And so, yeah, I did this. And then after 18 months, I realized actually that, what, I need to rebrand my company and rechange it. And that's when I realized actually much more better what my business is all about and going through the whole process and going through digging deep. And then I realized that, how I could restructure my business, reorganize my business and rebranded it and come back to something that I felt now this is me. And this is my company, and this is what I want to grow, and a brand that I wanted to build. And I think it's very important as well in business that you should be able to looking to build not a business but a brand as well. So it was important for me to put that together and launch it. And last 6 months now has been great, and I think the last quarter has been something that I'm pinching my fingers to say. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to 2019 and really excited about it now. But it has paid off. The hard work is paying off, and it's not over yet. But there's a lot more to do. But it's in a better place than what I was, you could say, 2 years ago. So
Yeah, and I think it's gonna only get better. So this should be a shout out to our listeners as well to check out countech.com. So I think you're onto something, and I think you are building a very valuable business and as a brand as well, as you just said. So I'd like to conclude on a small info about coaching, and I think it is something that you are instinctively doing correctly. So I have, because I had my background in psychology and have a lot of colleagues in that branches. I know the business of coaching and the professional what skills they use as well. And one of the most important skills, maybe the single most important thing coaches use, is to sit down with their clients and help them visualize and imagine in detail what life would look like when they have reached their goals. So that's very vivid. It works better if it is if it is more vivid and if it's really concrete in the mind of that person. So when they have that vivid image that to look forward to, then it is the biggest source of motivation to get up and do something. And I think you've done that instinctively, Mo. And I think even if you don't realize, that has a lot of parts to say in your success today. So kudos on instinctively thinking and self-coaching yourself through hard times, I guess.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. But yeah, looking forward to how this business can grow and what I can achieve. So I'm still learning. I still think I've got a lot to learn, and having the difficulties in life, I still think there's nowhere near where I could have. When I look back, sometimes I said I wish I could have had more support growing up. But even then, you got to be thankful as well and say, you know what, there's a lot more I can do. There's a huge source of information out today that we are so lucky, with information technology out there to be able to learn so quickly. So we should constantly be developing ourselves and improving ourselves.
Totally agree with that. And on that note, thank you for listening to us. This was Mo from Countech, and it was really wonderful to hear his story. Thank you, Mo, for taking the time to tell the story.
Thank you, Ozzy. And have a good morning for the rest of the day.
Okay, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.